Testing. Good morning, everyone. And I'm just going to apologize for how the weird weather in the room. We're going to get the weather fixed, but eventually. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask if everybody on the dais can just introduce themselves. May I start with you, Ignacio?
Ignacio Guerrero, Director for the Department of Child Support Services.
Bob Minicucci, Director, Social Services Agency.
It's a button's on the other side, Geeta. All right.
Geeta Siraj for County Council.
Cindy Chavez, member of the Board of Supervisors.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
John Mills for the County Executive's Office.
Thank you. And then, do we have any public comment? Okay, so we're going to move to the consent calendar and changes to the agenda. What we wanted to do was put item 3, the work plan, and item 4, our calendar, and item 4, the Senior Care Commission on consent, because we understand it just has to come through us, but we're all excited about it unless there's a problem with that. Is there anybody who would like to speak to item 3 or 4? That's the Senior Care Commission? No? You're okay. All right, good. So then we will, we have a motion?
On consent?
Yes.
I'll move it
We have a mo-
as revised.
Thank you. Oh, and also our minutes. You know what? Let me just see. I'm a little bit of a mess here. Yeah, I think I messed up on this. Yeah. I apologize, everyone. Yes, all right. So for item 3, we have already on consent our item 14, which is our minutes. We would be adding item 4, which is our meeting schedule, and item 5, which is the Senior Care Commission request. So that would be on our consent calendar. Is there anybody who would like to speak to the consent calendar? Seeing none? Gail, do you want to speak? You look like you're vibrating over there. It's hard to know.
Thank you. Thank you for approving this. I just want to say that there's 10 senior mobile home parks, and we will be working with each of them to bring in Second Harvest Food Bank once or twice a month and distribute free food to the seniors there. There's perishable foods and there's non-perishable foods. So we're really excited about it, and thank you so much.
And thank the commission for us. That's just innovative and smart, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. That passes. We'll now go to item 6, and this is aviation fuel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is members of the commission. Harry Freitas, Director of Roads and Airports. We prepared a staff report responding to this referral, and we're here to answer any questions, maybe make clarifications.
That would be great. I just have a few that I want to make sure we get on the record. So first of all, let me say thank you for the report. And I want to make sure that we just understand what the implications of the report are and what you learned from it. So I have here that documentation from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and our own county's public health department. And what they both say is there's no safe level of lead in the body. And is that your understanding as well?
Yes, that's our understanding, and we've substantiated that in more than one report previously. And that's, we're not experts on that, but we certainly rely on those professionals, and we completely understand that.
Great. And I also believe that we ended the use of leaded fuel in automobiles in the state of California in 1985. I don't know if that was the state or the nation, actually.
Yeah, there was a phase-out period. There was this transition period that the federal government, recognizing that lead was, dangerous, poisonous, they did a program to phase it out and ultimately banned it.
And we don't use lead fuel in jet airliners, do we?
That's correct. Jet fuel is a type of refined kerosene that does not contain lead.
And then the only aircraft that I know of, well, maybe that we're impacted by, is the piston aircraft itself, and that does use leaded fuel.
And that is also correct, commonly referred to as piston propeller aircraft. Exactly. They use leaded fuel. So generally all general aviation, small planes that have piston engines would use leaded fuel.
And that's primarily what we have at Reed Hill View.
That's correct.
And
There
San
are a few
Martin.
turbine engines there, but the vast majority of those motors are piston propeller aircraft. Yeah.
And I also understand from some research that both you and our office did that piston aircraft aren't able to be modified to operate with unleaded fuel. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't go use that. They can be modified. It is expensive. It depends on the aircraft and the actual motor and how modern it is. We described two ways of aircraft to not use it. I guess the factors that are really inhibiting it: one, cost of modification of engine, which is one; two, the rigorous FAA process called the Supplemental Type Certificate, whereby aircraft can be certified to use unleaded fuel. And then the third factor is just the lack of availability of the fuel itself.
Right, and I think there's only one company that's still working with the FAA on a new fuel mixture. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think. So I think I'll just stop there, just to say we don't have reliable availability of fuel, A, and B, I just want to reemphasize that it doesn't appear to me that that's something we can bank on in the long run. And I think in part because we're going to see a lot of changes I think in the industry overall. But the other thing that I'm just really concerned about and remain concerned about is how much, given that there's no acceptable lead level, then how do we continue to operate? I think it's just a big risk for kids. So I really appreciate the report. I appreciate you bringing it here. It's something that I would like to make sure that we have an opportunity to share with the San Jose City Council. There were a number of council members who had a particular interest in the issues related to the leaded fuel when we were visiting them. And then the second thing I'll just ask that I'm asking Scott in my office to work with you on is I want to make sure we have a very comprehensive list that we can respond to the City Council because they raised a number of issues and I want to make sure that we're addressing them. I haven't seen any report back from the meeting that we had with them. So just as a request.
Thank you. We'll take
Thank you
care of
very
that.
much.
Yeah.
Dave, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I'm fine.
All right. Thank you. Then we'll receive the report. And I think there's no further action needed on that. And now let's go to item 7, and this is the VASC. Thanks, Harry.
Good morning, members of the CSFC committee. I'm Roberto Mendoza, Capital Projects Manager with FAF, with your quarterly VASC update. So to bring you up to speed, the contractor has fully mobilized and is currently working on foundations for the project, and as well as under slab utilities. Over the next few weeks, we expect to have a slab on grade, followed thereafter by the erection of the steel and metal decking. So as far as the community engagement process, we've held our 5th community engagement over past February 7th for celebration of Lunar New Year, at which point we gave an update on the status of the construction as well as some information regarding the lighting art component of the building that we are pursuing. And we anticipate early summer, actually, we should start talking about the next community engagement event, which will be the steel, topping of the steel at the structure. The site is becoming progressively more crowded and busier, so we're going to have to really get a really good grasp of just how large of an event we can really have on site. So That's, this happened 2 weeks ago exactly, and here we go. We're pouring
That is so fun.
footings, about 320 cubic yards of concrete over the course of a day. Sorry, no soundtrack music to go with this, but
I know, Roberto's going to start singing in the background.
there it was.
That's awesome.
All right. And so from the previous report from December to our current status, we have no changes in the schedule. We're still tracking for meeting or beating that June 15th of 2021 for our end of construction.
Great.
Okay? So if you have any questions,
I only have one. It's not really a question, but it's more of a comment, and that is that I really appreciate the videotaping and the documentation of the process, and I want to just encourage you to keep doing that, because I think that there's a lot about this that will be very historic for people who come along after us. And I think the other thing I would just want to compliment your team on is just the community outreach and the number of people we've talked to and the methods we're using and the like, that I think are both good for you all as a department, but also for us kind of countywide in terms of how we proceed. So I'm very interested in you helping us think about the best way to do that.
thank you. We do plan to have a full-time camera, time-lapse camera at a different location, but we are planning to put that up in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's
Prior
great.
to this deal. So we will continue to document that, and that will be able to be accessed via website.
Oh, great.
As well as, at the end, we will compile the full process
And
for archiving.
And just one other thing I wanted to ask about is that I appreciate that we're finishing up the artwork on the exterior of the building, and we're now going to have to think about that curation space that's on the inside of the building. One thing I'm interested in understanding is getting a snapshot of the budget and where we are in our budget drawdown relative to contingencies and all of that. And I think if that just got to the board off agenda, it could go to everybody, if you wouldn't mind doing that. That would help me understand what we have left to work with.
Yes.
Great, I really appreciate
We
it.
are working with the stakeholders currently to finalize
Those numbers?
Yes.
Okay. What's the timeline on that?
I couldn't tell you, but it's top of our priority right now to get that worked out in the next few months.
So I think we need a ballpark of that sooner than that, in part because I need to understand if we have to take any kind of budget action, that I'm prepared to do that as part of our budget process.
Very well.
So even if it's just your best knowledge, probably we would need something. I think we start putting in budget requests like in April, so I'd need something close to the mid to end of March. Just again, ballpark, because if I don't need to take an action, I won't, but if we need to, I want to be aware to do, or prepared to do that. All right, thank you very much. Any questions that you have, Dave?
Just a minor thing. The Supervisor Chavez was talking about the video documentation and so forth. Are you keeping that up on a website somewhere where it's publicly accessible to check in?
It isn't currently, but we do plan to implement a camera system that will have on-the-fly reporting.
Yeah, even before then, whatever you have, if you can
We
put
can
it,
upload this for
if you
sure,
can
yes.
upload
Great.
it on a public website that we
Correct.
can direct people to, because I think our offices in particular, get inquiries, not just from individuals, but from groups that
Want to see the progress.
house
correct.
senior nutrition centers and such that would look at the project if they could easily access it like that. So I'm kind of seconding what she's saying, is that it's a good thing to do, but it'll also help us in between the community outreach we need to let people know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I also add something? Cindy, over here. Hey. So
Please, thank you.
we've also begun convening the work group for occupancy and the service planning. So that group has been established and a first meeting has been held. We'll be doing more work around outreach to get folks involved in that too.
Great, I really appreciate it. If I could make a request, and that is that the outreach that we've already been using, if we could just fold that in and not do something super new, because we just got the community all kind of buttoned up with the process, that would be great. And I'm really excited that you're already doing that. That you probably have to. That's a lot of work that you're going to need to get done beforehand. So yeah, great. Thank you so much, Bob. All right, so with that, we're going to receive the report and thank everybody who's been working on it. This is really exciting. So thank you for that, and thanks for the video. All right, so we're going to move on now to item 8, and this is the LGBTQ recruitment and retention. You can have our team come forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Chavez, Supervisor Cortesi, David Campos, Deputy County Executive, and I'm joined today by Maribel Martinez, who heads the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, as well as Gabrielle Antolovich from the Billy DeFrank Center. And before I turn it over to Maribel and Gabrielle, I just want to provide some context for how the LGBTQ office and the Division of Equity and Social Justice have looked at the issue of how do we address the needs of the transgender community. The employment piece that we're going to talk about is an important component of that, but there are actually larger issues. You know, I have always been of the opinion that when it comes to disenfranchised communities, whether it's in Santa Clara County or in any jurisdiction, San Francisco certainly, where I have some experience, being transgender is as disenfranchised as it can be, given the challenges that come with that, because there are transgender members of just about every community. There are transgender men and women who are undocumented, who have other challenges, but by virtue of being transgender are disenfranchised even within those communities that they're a part of, right? And so we have prioritized that community from the beginning of the creation of this division. So we actually created a transgender program within the Office of LGBT Affairs. In fact, hired someone to oversee that effort. That hiring did not work. It was not the right match. So we are right now in the process of hiring someone, a senior management analyst, to lead that effort. And one of the things that we have found is that probably the most challenging thing among many when it comes to addressing the needs of the transgender community is that we don't have a lot of data, like concrete data to actually fully understand the challenges in the various areas. And so right now, one of the things that is happening is that there is a transgender needs assessment that is already underway, where we have hired an expert who comes from that community who's doing research to inform the different actions that we intend to take, not only in the area of employment, but also some of these other areas. That said, we have taken some preliminary steps before that analysis is completed. As you know, Supervisor Chavez led the effort to open the Haven, which focuses on the needs of homeless folks within the LGBTQ community, focusing on the transgender community, and of course the clinic that also addresses the medical needs of that community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maribel so that she can walk you through the work that has gone on this specific issue of employment and hiring.
Thank you. Good morning. And what I was going to add is that we had intended to have our contractor here. Unfortunately, there was a conflict and she wasn't here, but we'll make time to bring her another time. Her name's Danielle Castro. She's a well-known international speaker on transgender rights and has been doing this work for us as collecting data around transgender needs. And so we'll definitely come back to this committee with that finalized report. In creating this report, we had several conversations with people from different departments, including ESA, OCCM, Office of Contracting Management, Office of Equal Opportunity. And what we all collectively saw was, one, a need to collect data. And not just data in the way that Danielle Castro is collecting data from individuals, but to collect county-wide and system-wide data. And we found 3 initial areas where we could begin to institutionalize data collection, and that's through the confidential demographic portion of the application process. We could also embed questions of climate and behaviors through the sexual harassment mandatory training, online and in person, and to also begin to collect demographic data anytime there is an electronic record, either for patients, clients, or participants. Many of our county contracted programs require a demographic data collection, and we should begin to collect sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, otherwise known as SOGI data. We do have a practice guide that has already been created for our office that could be distributed to all departments, and there's also some additional supports and coaching that can happen for this to be fully implemented. The other area that we focused on in this report and in our conversations was the review of our policy and procedures and processes. This will take a little bit more time, but initially what we discovered is that in our current non-discrimination policy, we don't explicitly mention gender expression. That is now being added, and I believe County Council is reviewing that addition. There's also a need to do a process evaluation. For example, when applicants are required to take an exam, the presentation of an identification could prevent folks and create a barrier for some whose identification doesn't match. So those types of processes, analysis need to take place so that we can identify at which point in the recruitment, onboarding, or retention process are there unintentional barriers that we could deploy some sort of intervention to address. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there as well. There's some best practice implementations that we are identifying, pipeline to employment. Similar to the way that we have the New Americans Fellows, there are opportunities for us to create specialized programming that create a pipeline to permanent employment, and for the community itself to see how the county is a viable employer for them in the future. There are recruitment postings and fairs, and Gabrielle will touch a little bit more about that, since the first transgender job fair was at the Billy DeFrank Center. But also countywide training is another area of best practice. We already have a Building a More Inclusive Workplace module. It's actually the first conversation simulator around this topic for government employees. We co-created that with Cognito, and a firm out of New York. And so right now that module is available for departments, no additional cost. But it has been implemented by departments specifically, whether it's volunteer. Some departments have made it mandatory, but not all. The further rollout of that to make it mandatory for all employees, we feel will create a better work environment that would make the county a more inclusive workplace. And then lastly, but certainly not least, in what we feel is the most important piece, yay, Danielle's here, is to really support community voice. And Danielle can speak a little bit more toward that. In really looking at what is the current perception of local leaders as it relates to county employment, and what are the ways in which they, as county leaders, are holding the community narrative of what they're seeing and what they're hearing from other folks in their organizations. And lastly, to really look at how can we invest in transgender-led organizations and transgender leaders. So with, lastly, I will also add for county contractors, we also discovered and are learning that there is a contract through the enterprise where we can perhaps explore how we can support incubation and increase of transgender-owned companies, supporting entrepreneurs, and seeing if there are pipelines there to county contracts as well. So with that, first I'll turn it over to Gabrielle to talk a little bit about the fairs and some of the things that she's hearing from the community center, and then we'll hear from our consultant and contractor, Danielle Castro.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know how to start, but the document that we have before us, and also some of the things that have happened, there are some misconceptions about the Billy DeFrank Center. And there's no secret that the Billy DeFrank Center had basically collapsed and imploded, and then the last 5 years, we have brought the Billy DeFrank Center back as a viable nonprofit and as a community center. And just recently, I was able to articulate with you, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, that we have reinvented the Billy DeFrank Center, and people don't really understand that. So I want to ask, is it possible for us to do a 20-minute presentation at the County Board of Supervisors about who the Billy DeFrank Center is right now and how people can work with us? Would that be a possibility? Because of nobody really knows who we are right now.
So Gabrielle, why don't you finish your presentation, and let me just make a
Yeah.
point about, so part of the reason we use these meetings is so we can wrestle things down to the ground and distill them for like in much smaller chunks for the full board, because those meetings go on forever and ever and you want people to really be paying attention to you.
Yeah.
And even today, normally when I have people give presentations, if they're talking even longer than 2 minutes, I would like to see a slide presentation, because it
Okay.
helps me understand how to distill what we need to get in front of the board. All that being said, go ahead and finish what you're saying, and then we'll strategize as collectively about next steps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I got a call saying that a transgender person, mainly Roxanne, wanted a job fair, and we all got very excited about it. And I think we got more excited about it than the transgender community. And I think that's something that we have to look at. You know, we jumped in and yay. And in the political environment right now, in the bigger picture, people are, you know, a little bit wary of government agencies. And
Yeah.
so, you know, no offense to the County Board of Supervisors, I have been close to this, you know, to this system here, and locally we are fabulous. But not everybody knows that. You know, they just see the bigger picture of what's going on in Washington, D.C., and then see, you know, they see government as government. So that's something, you know, to take into account as well. And so anyway, logistically, part of what, you know, we're a community center, but we're, you know, because I didn't say, you know, people need to pay rent if they want to have an event here, I saw it as our event. You saw it as your event because you put time and effort into it. And so, you know, there was a little bit of miscommunication around that, which is understandable. And then, you know, I have trained the press not to make a big deal at the DeFrank Center so they don't scare our people away. And then we had this big press conference there with a tent and everything. And I have found out that a lot of transgender people who wanted to come to the fair saw the press there and drove on. So that is a little bit of feedback too. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way everybody has known to be. We were all excited and had it all prepared. But that's something to think about. Marginalized groups don't trust the press, don't trust government, don't trust anything anymore, because things are the way they are, and I take responsibility for that as well. And like I said, we've been working very hard to integrate who we are within ourselves: lesbians, gay men, transgender people, trans women, trans men, the non-binary group. We have been working very hard to create a safe place for all of us. And having the job fair was such a mixed emotional event, even for me, because I'm going, oh my God, some of the people that we're recruiting were not vetted well enough and weren't comfortable there. And I could tell that, the people that recruit are not people like you who are much more in tune with issues and people. And so that was something I noticed on the day. And so when recruiting to populations that are marginalized, you need to have people of that population recruiting for jobs. And, that is something we all have to consider.
Yes. And so to summarize, I think the conversation that Gabrielle and I had, and in addition to your comments today, that we see a value in job fairs moving forward. There's definitely more communication and clear communication needed, perhaps even training to the folks who do the recruitment at these sessions. And we feel that we could put together a plan that is more robust, that is more expansive, because we did see participants from the job fair find employment, find community, and find resources. So we see a benefit to that. We also see that there's additional community work and systems work that needs to happen for us to be a more inclusive employer. And so we'll pause there for our report and allow for questions and any other conversation.
I just have one more comment too, that there were two things that people said: that it may be better to have a job fair not just for the county employment, but for businesses and nonprofits as well, to mix it up. And some transgender people felt that they were too visible as a group, and that maybe an LGBTQ plus job fair would be good too, so that everyone is part of that. So that was the other feedback.
Thank you for that. We'll get better at it. There's probably no other way to say that. And I will also say that in addition to the feedback you're giving me and that we got from Maribel and that I got from Roxanne, we got a lot of other feedback too. And I have to be frank with you, it wasn't very consistent. Like, it was very much in the eye of the beholder, oddly enough. And so I think, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because when you're trying to do new things, it's really iterative, and we're all going to make mistakes, and then we're going to find some successes. So I really appreciate you giving that feedback. Before I ask Dave and I to weigh in, do we have any comment cards on this item? So Roxanne, come forward, and then Amy will help you if you can just fill out a card for her, because I don't have one. Just for our records. Thank you. Oh, perfect. Thank you. You can hand that to Frank. Welcome.
I want to thank you, Supervisor Cortese, for sending this forward and having this meeting here today. I just want to point out that, to me, the issue here is this is institutionalized discrimination that's been going on in this county since 1882. The law on the books says no person shall appear in public wearing the dress not assigned to their sex. And you went to San Jose's prison. So this is something that's been going on forever, and I'm here to ask you, please let my community out of the lesbian and gay jail. My community was the ones that got our heads busted and put in jail at Compton Cafeteria and Stonewall. And now, 54 years later, we're sitting here with nothing. This office under Mr. Campos and Ms. Martinez has been in effect for 5 years, and they haven't added one new job for an additional trans woman. They have 2 people employed, but they already had jobs. And that's, to me, it's appalling that you hire one trans woman every 2.5 years. And so I'm asking you to follow the example of San Francisco and have an office of transgender initiatives that's out of the thumb of Mr. Campos and Ms. Martinez. Otherwise, we're not going to make any progress. That's my opinion. You know, when I filed my papers to run for office this year and went to the registrar of voters, I got degraded and insulted right at the counter because this office has not even done any training, and I look at the registrar of voters as a frontline office that deals with the public. How are we 5 years later that office hasn't even received any training? And it's been brought up, I want to thank Supervisor Chavez, because you're the one that got the ball rolling on that job fair. And I want to thank you for doing that. But it got derailed when the lesbians took it over. It was insulting for this office to have a makeup session at that job fair. That tells my community that she thinks we're too stupid to type in makeup lessons on YouTube searches. That was degrading to have them add that to the job fair. Is it saying that I have to look as beautiful as the one person they hired to be acceptable to be hired? That's the message that sends. And I think that that's wrong because most of my community is disfigured and disformed by testosterone like I am. There's nothing I can do about that appearance or disability. I think the problem that we have in this county is been mentioned. We don't have a seat at the table anywhere. And so most of the leaders from my community have applied to the county for jobs, and this office doesn't even grant us a chance to interview. I've applied multiple times, and not once have I even been given an opportunity to interview. We're not even talking about getting hired. We're talking, we don't even get to come in the room to interview for the jobs. So, and I think that's because none of my people have any positions. This is not something we need a big study for. You can look around. Who is in management? Who has jobs with the county? There's not one trans woman that has a job at a high level in this county. We don't get to sit at the table. And I look at the whole list of people that she says she's going to do this consultation with. Baymek, Bill Wilson, Project Moore, Rainbow Chamber, Rainbow Rotary, Stonewall Club, all the county offices that she's going to consult with. What do they have in common? Not one trans woman is employed there. Not one trans woman has a seat at the table. So if you're going to consult a bunch of outsiders about my community, give us some respect. Let us sit at the table. Let us share about our own community. Don't talk about us in a closed meeting and exclude us. You know, and so I'm going to end. She says there's no community voice for trans women, you know, and that's the first time I've seen it in writing that I guess I'm invisible. But I think that's just the status of where we are. You know, we don't count. And we haven't counted in this office, for that office, for 5 years. And so I'm asking you, please, let us out of the gay and lesbian jail and let us join the county, let us join society. We're intelligent people, and we want to be treated as human beings, not as things that they're going to study and talk about. They treat us like frogs on a dissection table and mice in a maze. And they figure out, oh, this is how we treat those things. We're not things, we're people, we're human beings. And I'm asking you to allow us to be human beings and let us out of the jail.
Thanks, Roxanne. And I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, you all know I'm usually very strict about the 2-minute rule. Our beeper's not working today. So, but I wanted to make sure, Roxanne, you got a chance to.
Supervisor, I'd like to be able to respond to those comments.
May I finish
Yes.
I know. Let me just say this. This was the only point I wanted to raise, which is that it is very clear to me that there are lots of there's lots of hurt and trauma and need in terms of healing and in terms of how we think about how we pursue healing. So I want you to know, Roxanne, and that is the framework under which I'm taking both your comments, and we'll get feedback from the group. Supervisor,
Yes,
David.
thank you. I mean, look, I want to be very respectful of members of a community that feel a certain way, and I think that everyone has the right to their opinion, right? But what they don't have the right to do is to impugn the integrity and the record of what an office has done, or to essentially make invisible the transgender woman of color that has been hired to help us with this effort. What I can tell you about my experience as the supervisor, who, by the way, created so many of the things that are happening for the transgender community in San Francisco, is that there isn't one person who can speak for that community. And so the fact that you are the loudest voice, supposedly on behalf of a community, doesn't make you the spokesperson for that community. What we have done is very clear. You know, we have prioritized this community from the very beginning, and in fact, we have hired a number of individuals from that community. The fact that we haven't hired the one individual that is speaking doesn't mean that we're not committed to that. So I just want to be very clear about that, and the idea that we would treat members of this community as anything other than human beings that we respect and we embrace and see as full partners is, to me, offensive and contrary to the record that is clear. And I just want to say that. And what I would hope happens is that we find a way of working with community members that are willing to work with us. We cannot make someone work if they don't want to work with us. So we are ready to work, but I will say this, that we have prioritized this community in every single way that we can. Where we haven't been able to succeed is that there is a larger challenge. The systems that are in place are so cumbersome and so difficult that even just getting something as simple as the right employment application takes a lot of time and energy. And to then train the staff across the system to make sure that they understand how to implement that in a way that is culturally competent is challenging, but it is not because we're not committed to that. And so I just want to put the record straight, because some of us have dedicated our lives to this struggle, and I think that it's completely unfair to distort that record in a 2-minute presentation that is disconnected from reality.
Let me just, I'm going to make a point because I have some feedback I'd like to give, and I'm going to let Dave, give feedback too. I think that one of the most important things that we do in the county is, no problem, that we need to be an institution that learns, period. And we need to get in a place where, and I'm not talking about the public right now, I'm actually talking about us, that where we are mindful of the fact that we're going to have lots of people coming at us all the time telling us that we're not doing what we need to do. You know, look, we have a labor struggle going on right now. I'm the most anti-labor elected official we have in the county for some people. I think we know that's not true. I couldn't do that if I tried. But people are going to have perceptions based on what they are personally experiencing. Now, David, what I appreciate about what you said, and I think this is very important, is what you're saying is that you have a lot of confidence in the people that you've hired and in the agencies that you've created, and I think that's very good. I think what people have a right to say or do, they have a right to say, right? And we look, I thought I was doing a great thing with the transgender fair, that the only person that was happy at the end of that day was me. And that's no bueno, right? So we got stuff to fix. And my only point there is that, and I would say this to you too, Roxanne, and anybody who comes here regularly, we are learning. I think the thing that I'm most clear about is that we have a lot of people who want to do the right thing. We just got to We got to just do it right, and that will take time to figure out. That being said, I do want to dive into the report, and I'm happy to go first unless you'd like to start.
This is good.
Yeah. So the first kind of thing, and I'm really glad John is here, that I just want to acknowledge is that, and this is the most uninteresting part of what we're going to talk about, to be honest with you, but it's actually pretty critical, which is the changes that are happening in ESA, which is a part of our organization that I think the whole organization is looking at to try to help fix, repair, / respond to. And so one of the big questions I have is that as this report is coming forward to us, I'm just curious as to the role that your office is playing, and if there is someone assigned to play a leadership role in providing support to the Office of LGBTQ Affairs.
Yes, Supervisor Chavez. Currently, we have 2 staff, one a senior human resources analyst in the Human Resources Department and a program manager in ESA administration who've been working closely with the team on this effort. I will say, though, that is sort of layered on top of their regular work, quote unquote, and we have a proposal that you will see in our budget submittal for this fiscal year that basically is requesting through a cost-neutral request the addition of a resource whereby we can sort of focus not only these efforts but other efforts that we have going on that are priorities of the board around pay equity and around interfacing with the efforts related to the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, essentially creating sort of what we're terming a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative within ESA that can help us not only in recruitment but in all of our service provision, whether it be in the benefits department and in terms of what our benefit plans offer and how our benefit plans treat different things, but being able to sort of have that lens impinge upon all of our lines of work. And the other thing that I will mention is through our organizational transformation process, we have already started by making available implicit bias training to all of our staff. So we have efforts internal to ESA sort of alongside our business process improvement initiatives that are aimed at threading this type of lens into all of our work.
So let me just make an observation, and I genuinely feel a little hamstrung in this area, because as it relates to the overall hiring and the strategies of the county, I think there's a lot of expectation. I know there's a lot of expectation around what we want ESA to be doing. Frankly, all of us want ESA to be doing. And there's a presentation that's going to come to the full board on ESA. Is it the 10th or the 24th?
The 10th.
Okay. And what I and one of my concerns, and I hope Gara is coming the same day, and I'm gonna ask you to make sure that's the case.
I think it is, but yeah.
Because what I would like to do is make sure that we can hear all of these things, these initiatives together. I'm not sure I'm going to recommend that this be on the 10th, but I do want to make sure that the response to the issues that have been raised as it relates to ESA are really called out, and that we can be very concrete and deliberate about when you would be coming back to the full board with timelines to address some of these issues. Because I do think that there's so much happening with ESA, like there's this kind of broader transformation, but in the meantime, we have these very explicit tasks that need to be done. And if the staff does not have capacity to do them, I'm going to say to you what I said to Dr. Smith, which is I would much rather us bring in a consultant who can go through and look at job applications and all of that kind of stuff that's more tedious and more, that requires a level of attention that we can give someone who's got some experience to move these things forward. And if that's not part of the recommendation when we get a timeline, I think I just might force it upon you all, because I think you have too much to do, but we kind of have these crises going on, and we got to be able to handle both. So the best way you could think about how that's not an extra layer of a burden for you, but actually being able to bring in a partner, because even your own, and I'm not just saying you, but even the hiring process for bringing someone else in, I don't know when that would happen. Like, I don't know, even if we get a position and then we have our own processes, and they just go on and on and on. So that's kind of a first thing to think about. Do you have any thoughts, or do you want to just think about that a little bit more?
We'll definitely think about it, certainly. The other thing, just for the committee's consideration that I would sort of lay alongside that, one of the things that I know I've been talking about, whenever I have the opportunity to sort of highlight it in, off-agenda reports or responses that I send to the board, is our technology infrastructure, or lack thereof, in ESA. And so recognizing the concern that you raise, in terms of being able to just have a resource to be able to sort of help us review existing business processes, my biggest concern is that, without being flip, that like we can review our business processes all we want, but if we don't have the technology to be able to realize some of the efficiencies that will help with the timelines and the process improvements, that we're just going to essentially be mapping kind of the as is and then not really have anywhere to go.
And is that because we don't have money set aside for your technological improvements right now? Or is it because we don't know what we need because we haven't done the mapping and we haven't figured out the new plan?
So we do have some money set aside for our technological improvements. We have conceptual IT projects that have been approved that are all at some level of progress. The biggest need that we have in ESA is we do not have staff from TSS assigned to us. And so, say for like our applicant tracking system, like we administer that ourselves. We don't have someone looking at the technology or helping us interface with the vendor, or helping us think about there's other technological ways that we can sort of modify this and do it better. And within our own ESA staff, we don't have that technological expertise to be able to sort of see and know what the options are. So I would say for us, that's our biggest need. I do know, and I don't want to speak out of the recommended budget process timeline, knowing that the county executive is going to go through his own process of looking at departments' requests and making his recommendation based on the big picture. But I do know that TSS does have a request coming this fiscal year. I believe it's for 5 positions to help us with all of our technology projects and to get some of these things going and down the road that can then really interface with the business process improvement initiatives that we've been working on through CLT, that I really think we need the technology to push us to the next level.
I think I think those are really excellent points. I absolutely think you need technology. I do think we need to figure out what the department's going to be doing prior to that, or maybe concurrent to it, because I think what I am broadly in favor of is Dr. Smith's kind of direction around, it sounds like kind of splitting the roles, and so I would be interested in understanding how, as you think about this, as budget comes up, like what's the matrix look like that we're going to be taking X action and Y action and Z action, and some of it is really going to be interdependent on something else happening prior to. So however, we'll have to think a little bit about how to explain that to the board. I particularly think that on the 10th, that's got to be super clear, in terms of intentionality, because I think that people feel it's so broken that everybody's going to try to help you, including me. And so, really go to the freezer, get the box is what I would recommend.
And I guess I would say relative to the 10th and sort of relative to the question of, sort of how do we bridge the gap between today and the technology sort of coming on board and the technological assistance that can help us move forward. The 10th, basically in a nutshell, goes through a little bit of the extensive sort of engagement and assessment phase that we went through with departments, and the themes, I'm sure, would not be a surprise to you, are very common in terms of timelines, communication, transparency, visibility of processes. And then what we have in that presentation is various initiatives, and some of them are technology solutions that, frankly, we have some crackerjack people who kind of built them themselves, that we're piloting right now with departments in terms of like a recruitment dashboard, various data analytics tools that we've kind of built that just pull data from our applicant tracking system, from our human resources information system, to be able to give departments a picture in depth of their workforce and help them with succession planning, and just give them tools that they haven't had because we haven't had the sort of technological wherewithal to get the data from where it's hiding, put it into a meaningful format, and be able to provide it to them and have a conversation with them about what it means. So on the 10th, you'll see some of these solutions that we've developed now that are just starting to surface to departments. Our hope is that these solutions will sort of spur along this culture change that we're trying to initiate, give us these tools to be able to have these conversations with departments. Meanwhile, to the extent that the technology and the support comes along to push us on to the next level, that will help us get there. That's the idea.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have is that depending on the kind of person you are and you come through our process, that there, for a lot of people, well, I think anecdotally, we have a lot of people that interface with the county to apply for jobs that feel like they are being rejected for some personal reason. And I think that the systems we have, technological or just interpersonal, leave people feeling like I'm not welcomed, I'm not respected, I'm not seen for what my skills are. I think we have tests that don't make sense as they align to the jobs. I mean, I think it's so challenging that we've sort of had we've had a hard time engaging everybody, and to a more or less degree, it's been a higher barrier than a lower barrier. And I think, Roxanne, the point you raise is a really good one around that issue, which is not, I don't think that's a your office issue. I think that's how the county means to show its face to the community relative to ESA. So that and you know this, you've heard all the same complaints I have.
If I may, just wanted to add that Danielle we are happy to have her work with ESA to address some of those issues. We've had challenges with transgender staff in terms of getting applications through, and it's taken different iterations to get to that point. So I think that even if the technology takes time to get to, I think that it would be helpful to bring her in to help, kind of go through some of the experiences of what it means as a transgender person to apply. So
to to finish that thought, I think that there are other, like, and I just want to align this also with GARE, that's similar feedback we're getting from communities of color, that we're getting from, actually, that we're getting from social workers, no matter what, and that we're getting from, I don't know who the system works best for, but, and I'm not even sure it's all, I mean, I think it's kind of countywide. So what brings me to another issue that I just want to make sure I touch on, and that is that the implicit bias training that we're offering, that it's not mandatory. Is that accurate?
You mean countywide?
Yeah.
I don't believe so, no.
So I think that's actually something that should be mandatory, and I think it would be of value to have that curriculum evaluated by a whole number of offices. And I will say that some of the implicit bias training, we've gotten really mixed reviews on whether or not it's reflective of the community too. And I don't think that's your office that's leading that.
No.
Whose office is that?
Equal Opportunity Department.
Yeah, so maybe let them know that on the 10th, I'm going to be asking them a couple of questions about the development of the curriculum and the framework of it, because I actually think that's not just a little significant, it's really dramatically significant. And then the other is, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'd be curious about what departments are getting trained first. And I think, you know, the Registrar of Voters is a really good example. We also have people who are getting medical, they're coming through different departments with medical needs that, in my mind, you know, if I had a way of giving the county a saying, it would be no judgment, just service. And I don't know how to get to no judgment, just service, absent us making sure that that's a really core value that the county has that gets expressed in training, in evaluation, and in feedback. And I'm quite certain that that's not true. And I mean, I know it isn't. And so I'll raise that with you, because I know that that office works directly for Dr. Smith. And so I'm presuming that you can help make sure we make some of those bridges.
Absolutely.
I want to just, Dave, I want to stop and give you a chance, because I could really do this all day, and I know that's not helpful to anybody. We have more ideas, more issues on the agenda as well.
Oh, thank you, Chair Chavez. So, housekeeping issue which is very minor, and then I'm going to get into the substantive stuff. And this is, by the way, not directed at this particular panel or department or anything else, because we're relearning how to do this, I guess, from the clerk to the county executive. This referral was initiated by me in my office, not just generically item number 11 from such and such a date. And we have emphasized with the county executive's office and the clerk herself that when these transmittals come forward, they should have the supervisor of origin or supervisor's names, because as time goes on and similar issues are brought forward by members of the Board of Supervisors, obviously ratified by the full Board of Supervisors, they get more and more, it gets more and more attenuated as to where did that come from, and where was that initiated? Was it even initiated as a board policy, or was it something that the executive or somebody else brought forward on their own? I say that now to start setting up a substantive couple of comments on my part. It's probably because I'm going to guess, because there's not enough space for all the characters, but that's being generous. When you look at the overhead, when you look at what's up here, receive report from the Office of the County Executive relating to the expansion of recruitment and retention efforts for transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and gender diverse employees, applicants, and contractors, and then somebody put a period there. But the referral had a comma there, and it said giving specific recommendations and prioritization to recruitment and retention efforts for transgender women. And it's more than ironic that that got left off the agenda, the published agenda up here today that the public is looking at. I'm not saying anyone did it on purpose. I'm just saying it's bothersome because when we put the referral together, every single one of these words was very, very important. And I did some outreach, I think significant enough, with the community to see, I don't know, should this referral be, if we're prioritizing the transgender women, should it just be about that? Like, kind of like the resource fair you were talking about. And the feedback came back, no. I mean, from some said it would be great, kind of finally, to just have an emphasis on transgender women and not lump them in with other categories. But some said maybe some of the things that you were talking about, Gabrielle, in your report. Well, why don't we look at recruitment and retention efforts, across these other categories and just make it clear that it's a particular priority to focus now on transgender women, which leads me to kind of my last substantive comments here. This is good. This tension is good. I don't, it's hard and it's awkward, maybe to some degree. It's painful, but it's good. And two things I think should be happening here that many of us have experienced in our career because we've made progress, and that is this is a civil rights issue, fundamentally, at its core. And secondarily, but importantly, again, my lived experience as an elected official is when civil rights issues are stuck and they need to move and they need to change, typically loud voices come forward and initiate that process. And oftentimes they're individuals or an individual. I don't want to misrepresent the legacy of our own former colleague and the Supervisor Ken Yeager, but there was a time when I just remember him being the only one, I'm talking 20 plus years ago, speaking out about some of the issues relative to the gay community. So I could certainly say that in a number of other areas. You were talking about how some issues with hiring practices and so forth are on an ethnic, coming from an ethnic perspective or a racial perspective, or even you talked about a certain category of employees like social service employees. Again, if you zoom back out, we've seen that kind of history in a lot of places. And I think what we're just asking for here in the intentionality of the referral is a little more blunt than the report, but the report's good. The report's good. We need to study. We need to we need to have data and baseline information, and we should keep that. And if there's, I don't know what all the complexities are of even getting into personnel, whether people are self-identifying or not, through application processes and maybe we'll hear some of that from the consultant at some point, what you can and should do and shouldn't do in application processes, and it's all really important. I get that. But if you just zoom way back out, we just want to hire more transgender women now. And I think that now part, like, this is what we see, this is what we feel, and this is the action that we want to take, and we want to take it now, is sort of just fundamental to most civil rights issues that require or demand immediate action and change. It's that simple. So I just wanted to just kind of try to come back full circle to what can we do right now that isn't tied up in too many consultations, studies, reworking applications, culture and transformation, or anything else. I mean, what can we just do right now? I actually think the resource fair was a good learning experience because it was a right now thing. You went out there, did it, you learned, hey, if we did it again, we'd probably do it differently. Then let's maybe, do we do it differently and just get out there and not worry about feelings or who's to blame for the last one not being perfect? Let's just go out and try to do another one and get people hired. And I just want to say, I think that's the intentionality here. On my part, bringing the referral. Now, Supervisor Chavez, I mean, I don't know if I was that, we usually run through these pretty quickly at the board level, and I don't know if I was that clear at the board, but I feel like the board, you know, sent this out with a unanimous vote, and I suspect most of my colleagues felt there is a fundamental civil rights type of issue here that we want to move on quickly.
So
not to suggest that it's anything less than complex, because if it wasn't, it would probably not still exist as a problem at some level. But we have just this. Just want to say this, David, and all of you. We have a tremendous track record of success here and in the region for taking these stuck civil rights issues. It's not fair that this one is coming at this time as opposed to not being dealt with 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago. But it's here now, it's on the table, and we have a tremendous record of success of dealing with these. And you alluded to that. At least from a regional standpoint, I agree. Let's just knock it out. Let's just go start getting people hired. And who they are, that obviously depends on qualifications and so forth, that I think is beyond this committee's purview. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Chavez. I'm sorry I didn't keep to the 2-minute rule.
No, you don't have to. I'm gonna actually call on David, and I have a bunch of people raising their hands. I'm gonna take one comment from each of you, and then I'm gonna make some next steps. So, David, do you want to go first, and then?
I wanted to make 2 points, because I think that, and one is more immediate in terms of addressing the issue of hiring people, you know, and I say this based on my own experience with the county and the bureaucracy of the county. In terms of getting members of a community exposed to county government and eventual employment by that government, the one program to me that has been the most effective in doing that in terms of actual numbers is the New American Fellows program. And one of the geniuses of that, right, is that it brings people from a community, it exposes them to county government, it shows, it allows county government to see the contributions that that community can make, and lo and behold, many folks have actually ended up being permanently employed through that. We have had this, I have had this conversation with county council. You can't, you know, have a fellowship that simply says it's open to members of the transgender community, but the way that you can do it is actually to have a fellowship legally that actually focuses on the need of that community, with the idea being that that will lead to applicants that in fact come from that community. So that's one thing. I think that if anything has worked that I have seen, it's that, and that's something that I would pose as an option that the county could pursue. And then the second point, and this is sort of a larger systemic point about the county, because I do think, by the way, to the extent that people think I'm defensive, I actually want to be criticized. I think that's part of the role of community. The challenge here, and this is something where I think that intervention by county government is needed, is that there isn't actually an organization that exclusively focuses on the needs of the transgender community. And because of that, you have individuals coming forward, and I respect the role that they play. But I actually think that there should be an organization, because what happens in places like San Francisco is that when changes have happened, it's not just the county saying, or the city, we're going to do them, but community-based organizations saying that to them. And I actually think that the only way, based on where things are right now, that such an organization can come together is if the county intervenes and actually helps establish something along those lines, because I don't see the philanthropic or the business community helping to make that happen. I think that, you know, doing something where there is funding available for an organization to be created for that purpose is something that could not only serve us well with respect to this issue, but other issues facing the community.
So through the chair,
Yes.
just three comments on those three things. On the legal issue of a transgender fellowship program, I know we're both attorneys and we respect county council's admonitions about where to be careful, but I would welcome somebody challenging us on setting up a transgender fellowship program legally as being somehow legally improper, because I actually think that would create more good tension about what's really broken. So I know that's something we would have to say as a board of supervisors. Supervisor Chavez, I've served with for I think around 20 years, and I've heard her so many times say to government attorneys, be bold, you know. Sometimes we just have to, we're not trying to invite a lawsuit, but sometimes we have to do what we have to do because the law is not set up correctly yet. As far as the outside nonprofit, I think that gives us a possibility for some direction, Supervisor Chavez, to, you know, maybe have, I'm not sure how we would have that come back, but, you know, to have our professionals figure out where that, what that looks like, and that's not really before us today is what I'm saying, but I'm certainly intrigued by that. And then the other thing I want to say, and it's not really teed up today, so I mean to be fair, although I see Araceli here, I'm going to probably wake her up when I say this or get her attention. But when I said the tension is good, when I first got here, we were having this kind of tension around overrepresentation along race and ethnic lines in the county, and we had people around the table in public like this getting tense, and I would actually say angry with each other because they were police officers who were being accused of picking up too many people of color. They were justice system folks who were accused of not intervening and diverting youth of color enough. We were having civil rights organizations that were saying this has been going on for 40 years and other counties are not as disproportionately represented in our systems as we are. We had educators who said it's not our fault, we're not showing up at the meetings. And it really bothers me that we're not having those discussions anymore. That's what I meant when I said this is good. The tension is good. It's good to have the debate because otherwise it's just out there statistically studied, but in effect swept under the rug somehow. And I don't think any of us want to do that. I think we want this stuff to surface. So thank you for engaging today, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I appreciate the engagement on the issue.
Roxanne, and I apologize, I forgot your name. Danielle? Okay, we'll go to you next. Roxanne, and then Danielle. I'm sorry. Danielle, and then Gabrielle. I'm so sorry. Either way. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. So I've been advocating for my community for over 30 years. I was born here in San Jose, and I started as a 13-year-old little mini-me. And I remember the day when I was appointed as commissioner for the Human Relations Commissions by Blanca Alvarado for District 2, and I remember the day when I started a needle exchange program for trans women with the County of Santa Clara Public Health Department under the bridge downtown San Jose for all of the homeless and survival sex workers that were coming for needles there. And I just have so many memories of being so livid, sitting at planning council tables and commissions and board meetings, and the passion that still exists in my heart for my community. You know, hearing Roxanne speak up and speak out on these issues is just reinvigorating, and I agree, like what has happened in the last 30 years? Where are we now? And it is frustrating to see how long it takes for things to happen in bureaucratic systems, and when there's so many different barriers to becoming employed by the county and the traumas that we have as a community that we hold, that then somaticize and become disabilities. I'm disabled. I was working as a director at UCSF for community-based research. I'm now disabled. And I'm just so fortunate to be able to actually be contracted with the county to get by so that I can help my community one way or another, because that's what I'm going to do until I'm dead. But I appreciate that sense of erasure and the urgency to do something, erasure from community standpoint, and the urgency from both trans and non-trans people to do something now. And I also appreciate the idea that we need to do it thoughtfully and do it in a way that doesn't set us up for failure. I've been employed by county systems, and it was a complete disaster. I was the first person hired after a trans woman had killed herself at San Mateo County. 5 years later, I was hired. I wasn't told that happened, and I ended up having to leave because of the transphobia that existed within the county. They froze hiring of trans women specifically because they didn't want that to happen again. If, my comment back was, if a woman hangs herself, are you going to stop hiring women? So, these ideas that we get stuck in our minds really place more barriers for the advancement of inclusivity. And I think it's important to, yes, do the work before us and look at what systems exist, what barriers exist, what facilitators there are for having trans people hired into the county. That would be my first recommendation, is really looking at what's there now and what's stopping you all from hiring people. I hear you, Supervisor Cortese, hire a trans woman. Put your money where your mouth is. You have that power to do that. We all do. We all have that power to hire trans people. What's stopping us? And I don't want to point the finger at anybody. That's not why I'm here. I just want to say that there are systematic barriers in place that we do need to identify and overcome and change if we hope to have a place where we're fostering that relationship and including trans people in a meaningful way. I'd hate for what happened to me in San Mateo County at other organizations to happen to anyone else, and so
Thank you.
just
Were you finished?
being mindful of the way we're bringing in people and supporting them.
Great.
Is important.
Thank you. You have the last word.
There are actually two kinds of jobs that I think, and I remember mentioning this before, is that there are just regular jobs that transgender people want in the county, and then there are teams of people that would benefit from having a transgender person on the team, like in a substance use treatment program, and social workers, and any kind of team, because when you have someone on the team deliberately hired to be part of that, the consciousness of the whole team changes. And that's how sometimes systems change, is that you have deliberate hiring of transgender people onto a team. And I think that should be part of the mindfulness of the hiring practices, not just for the county, but anywhere. The other point I wanted to make is that in Santa Clara County, there is a consciousness among transgender people about who they are. It's not just individuals. There is a burgeoning movement, and a lot of them are meeting at the Billy DeFrank Center because they're comfortable there and they're coming into their own. And so there is more than individuals who have the consciousness about who they are. It's really becoming obvious to us, and we're creating the safe space for that to grow, however that grows. So it's, and that's a good thing, what you're saying, Supervisor Cortese, that tension is rising, and it's rising as a group as well as among individuals. So I'm really happy about that. And it's good to see you, Danielle.
So, so here's what I would like to recommend. I want us to receive the report. I'm going to ask Supervisor Cortese if he would be interested in coming back to the board with a more refined recommendation for actions and next steps, or if we want to bring it back here to do that before we take it to the full board.
I'd like to come back here one more time. I think you're kind of wrestling it to the ground.
Yeah.
You know, metaphor is appropriate here, and this is the first time that we've really had this kind of a robust discussion here on this issue. So I feel like it's been a good discussion. If I thought it was unproductive, I wouldn't want it to come back anywhere, but it's been productive today. And I think Danielle just gave us a couple, you know, direct points, bullet points to focus on, you know, what's stopping us right now, and what's getting in the way of hiring now. And then secondarily, what are the systemic barriers? Let's work on the longer term work of identifying those and removing them, which I think you've already done a whole bunch of work in today's transmittal on sort of blueprinting for us where to go to do that longer term work. But maybe coming back with some short term, more immediate steps would be on my wish list, especially having heard from Danielle just now.
So the direction to staff would be to come back with short-term, more immediate steps. And what I'm going to recommend is that we don't normally do this, but I'm also going to open it up for both of us if we want to bring something in writing also, so that we can narrow the, you know, really focus. And then the only other thing I wanted to add is that I do think it's the most critical discussion in my mind that needs to happen from a more systemic place is really between ESA and you all. And I know this is a separate item, but I am mindful that as GARE comes forward, there's some very similar initiatives and issues that we're going to need to deal with through that GARE process as well. And so I don't, David, do you have a lead on GARE from your team? Who is that?
That's Dr. Blume, who is here, and I think that it's coming back to the board March 10th.
What I would like to recommend is that, in addition to Dr. Blume, if you can engage Tamika from SSA to better understand the linkages, because I think there are issues relative to being trans. I think there are issues relative to being a trans woman of color. I mean, there are lots of slices to this apple, and I want to make sure we've really thought those through. The other thing I'm going to request is that when this come back, that I'd like to meet with you before the meeting, because I want to make sure we can focus on some concrete deliverables from the outcome of this meeting to the before it would go to the board, just because I think that's going to be important. All right?
If I may, just a quick clarification in terms of the timing of when you would like us to come back to you.
What I was hoping for is that I think it's going to be really important if we can get back here March, April, because if there's any budgetary action that needs to take place, we really want to be able to hear it before then. My feeling is that this does not need to be rewritten, but it needs to be supplemented. And I think in particular to be more responsive to Supervisor Cortese's actual referral. So what I'm also going to request is that when staff brings this back, they bring Supervisor Cortesi's referral attached to it so that we can better understand how this aligns to the requests that he was making more directly. And then some of the key initiatives that came out of this discussion, I think, is really what Supervisor Cortesi has raised again today, which is what's the most immediate actions that we can take, and let's start going through those. I want to think a little bit more about some of the other issues you raised about the role of government versus the community and all that. I think that was extremely thoughtful, but I need to process that before I give any feedback to that.
Can we be specific enough to say that we're willing to look at a new American Fellows style program since that model's already
I was
built?
going to let you just bring that back, but I think if you want them to bring that back, then yes.
It's up to you, Supervisor. We
I'm,
can do that in
I'm
the.
tied closely enough to the new American Fellows one to just,
Do you just want them to bring that back?
yeah, because
Okay.
the model is just already in place. You would, but the reason I'm mentioning it right now is not just for clarity as to what to bring back, but also if we can give sort of a strong signal to County Council's office right now, live, real time, that we want to be as bold as possible in terms of how to characterize that as focused specifically on the transgender community. If you're okay with that,
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea. So if you can bring that back in the month, that actually will have a budget implication. So we'll have to do this in the next meeting. But our next meeting is March 26th. So we'll see you back then.
And we're certainly happy to be challenged and being as bold as we can. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. So we have a direction to staff.
Moved.
And it's moved, and we will see you back on the 26th of March. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for your feedback. All right, so we're going to move on then to item 9, which is summer camp enrichment. Thank you all. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is George Montes with the Social Services Agency, presenting on updates for the summer camps program.
Hi, good morning. Dan Little, Acting Director at DFCS.
Hi, I'm Crystal Chavez. I'm with SSA-OCM.
And so we are just waiting for the PowerPoint to pop up really quick. Well, I guess I'll just get started and just want to start by first acknowledging Crystal Chavez. She's been the program monitor for the summer camps for over the past 2 years, and Amy for her intimate involvement in helping us get the summer camps program up and running. The summer camps program has been up for 2 years. The first year, as you know, had a bumpy start. The second year we ramped up. That was partly through a pretty big, broad initiative of trying to do a little bit more outreach to different board offices, different divisions within the Social Services Agency and other agencies around the county. A little bit of background, the inventory item number 47 awards $350,000 for summer camps. It started in calendar year 2018. The goal was to activate a summer camps enrichment program for kinship and foster care probation, CalWORKS, CalFresh, and low-income families. 2 contracts were created, one for $150,000 with San Jose City and the other one with CAFPA. A little bit of an overview on the population served. CAFPA served 369 youth and utilized 96% of their budget. The city, on the other hand, served 64 youth and used 29% of the budget. We had some challenges there on access that we will point out here in the other slide. Combined participation was 433 youth. 67% of the total budget was used over the course of 2 years. 81 distinct summer camp and enrichment activities were offered. 51 participants were male, 49 were female. Concentration was below the age of 12. Lower concentration of people served were 13 and above, and very small concentration in the 17 and 18-year-olds. Of the 51 families that responded to a satisfaction survey, 90 indicated they were satisfied, 92 stated the program met their needs. And over the 2 years, there was just a lot of lessons learned. We kicked it off. It was a challenge during the beginning. We applied many CQI interventions to try to navigate the process to improve the process. We learned that vendors with a Santa Clara County-wide geographic reach that are connected to the intended population do better than the others. The city of San Jose did a lot of effort to try to outreach, but they were confined within the boundaries of the city, and that was one of the challenges. We also learned that access was an area that we needed to improve, despite the fact that we've done a lot of outreach, opened up fairs to enroll kids into the summer camps. People had to come to places to get registered. And we were exploring website portals to improve that process. That's an area that we still have on target, but it's still, we are experiencing some challenges there. We also learned that over the course of the 2 years, the program has been managed by my department. This year, we want to partner heavier with the FCS. We feel they have a direct concentration of population and children that could do a better job in reaching out to those families. Over the 2 years as well, families struggled with transportation. This is an area we quickly bridged those resources with Hop Skip Drive to offer some resources for kids to get to summer camps. This is something that we've incorporated here as we move forward. The program became very popular after the second year when people learned about it. We anticipate and predict that the program is going to become even more popular with more concentration. We did put out a 2-year plan, and thank you very much, Board of Supervisors, for approving that plan yesterday. It had small increments to account for the population growth over the next 3 years. It also incorporated areas where we needed to do a little bit more outreach with administrative support to facilitate that process as well. Moving forward, yesterday the Board of Supervisors approved the summer camps enrichment activities. We were concurrently working with CAPA on trying to get that ready to activate on time. We do have a target of activation on March 1, 2020. And Daniel, I don't know if you want to.
No, I think to tie into what George had said, I think that this year DFCS is going to take a more active role. I think that we have the relationships and the engagement with some of the target population, target families. So with SSA and Office of Contract Management technical assistance, DFCS is going to take more of a role in that engagement and connecting families directly up with these services.
Thank you very much. I think this is such amazing work, and I know we were unhelpful in terms of the time. I say we, I meant me, unhelpful in terms of bringing it up right at budget and asking us to do it the first summer. So I really, really appreciate your leadership. I have a couple of clarifications that I wanted to make. In the referral that the board voted on, we asked for Youth Science Institute, the Giants, the Guadalupe River Park and Garden, San Jose State, and the Boy Scouts to be included. In particular for, I think it may be the Youth Science, not Youth Science Institute, but the Giants and Guadalupe River Park and Gardens. This would be them reinitiating programs. So I want to make sure that we've had a conversation with each of them about whether or not we need to invest in one whole week just for foster youth or 2 weeks for foster youth. Like, I want you to just dig in with each of those organizations that we haven't partnered with before. Now, San Jose State has football camps, basketball camps. They have all kinds of great stuff. I don't think we have the same challenge with them, but part of the reason I was interested in the Giants in particular is they create opportunities for older youth, and they're interested in taking both boys and girls. And I think where we have a deficit is just with those older kids and doing something that they find fun and not babysitting, right? And that really gets them outside, away from video games and, you know, the indoors, the great indoors. So I'd really want to get a response back off agenda, just whether or not we were able to lift those programs up. Like I said, they may require us just to pay for 2 weeks and then a certain number of kids, and do our best to recruit those children both through DFCS and also through CAPCA. And then the other thing is that I want to make sure that we're partnering with the child advocates and the court-appointed CASAs. Those CASAs are really busy little bees. They look for things for their youth to get engaged in. I also think that they're different than almost anybody else in our system in that they're so client-focused because they're volunteers and their only job is to help a child succeed, that I think that we would glean from them two things. One, I think it's a great way to get the information to the older kids in particular who can decide a little bit more about what they want to do with their time. But second, I think it would help us understand if we're missing some opportunities that young people are really interested in that are in that older group. They help, obviously, CASAs help children from 0 to 18, but the ones that really stick with it have some teens that I think those teenagers talk to them, and I'd like to make sure we access that as a resource. Is that okay with everybody? Does that clear?
Oh, yeah, it's very clear, and great recommendations. Thank you.
Just one last thing with Kafka and just how we use the online, like how we do this online work. Could you talk just a little bit about the point you raised about the portal and how people can and can't? Do we have such a portal yet?
We were exploring the InPlay web portal to be able to handle registration.
I don't think they
InPlay
do
has
that.
been successful in putting out an inventory of all the resources we have, but we don't have an ability to register from there directly.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm probably the least understanding of that contract of the whole board, because to me, if from an access perspective, like really what I'm looking for is how do we help people access the service? And so what I'm wondering is, we have other services that we provide in the county that allow people to sign up online, especially our wellness program. So we actually have a model, a TS, our own department, ISD, did the model, and I don't know who operates that model, but I'm just wondering if we can use that ourselves. I don't mind if it's under CAPCA's headline, but yours or, multiple places that people can just sign in. That's confidential, that would go to the folks that we know have that we can help. So one thing that we've had in the works for 2 years now is really making the Department of Children and Family Services website user-friendly for foster parents, for everybody, right? And so I know it's in process. What I would like to recommend is that at our next meeting, we just see where we are in that process. If we can just have a live demonstration that says, here's what you can see, that would be one. And the second is, I would really recommend that we talk to, I know it's not ISD anymore. What is it? TSSC? TSS, I'm just adding letters now. But to talk to TSS about whether or not they can recommend something for us to be able to use for people to access so they can sign up. Because the one challenge is even the fair that Kafka does, which is great, it still requires somebody to get over there. And we haven't fixed respite care yet, but they got to get over there and they got to get everybody signed up. And I just think it's a little more challenging than it should be for them. And if we can't do that this year, I would like it to be a target for next year, but I would like a report back that we've actually gotten the attention of someone to help us figure it out, or help you guys figure it out. Is that all right with everyone?
Oh, yeah, it's a great recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, George. And I'm really excited about this. Look forward to seeing kids sign up. Do you know when the date is? I think it was in here, and
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
the date of the, because you're starting March 1, everything will become available, but Kafka's doing a fair too, right?
Yeah, that's we're going to coordinate with CAFPA to make sure that we outline this whole plan with fairs and outreach efforts and all of that. That's going to be articulated as part of the contract. I don't have that day to day, but I could put it on the Alpha Agenda report once I have it.
That would be great. And just so we know, because what I'd really like to do is make sure that my my colleagues all have that information so we can push it out in our emails, because I think between all of us, we probably get, I don't know, a lot of families that we'd be able to reach out to. Great. Very good. So with that, we'll receive the report and make sure that we are working on Youth Science Institute, the San Jose Giants, well, not Youth Science Institute, like I said, they have programs, but the Giants and the Guadalupe River Park and Gardens, to make sure that they've got enough to get moving, and make sure we've talked to San Jose State so that they know that we may want to buy some slots from them. Whatever you think is most effective to get older kids slots. All right?
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. All right. So we're going to receive that report, and then we're going to move on to Neighborhood Safety Unit. Yeah, I apologize that I know we have a hard stop at 11:35 and we have the cross systems coordinated report. Araceli, can we move that to our next meeting? Sorry, I should have told you that. Maybe I wasn't watching the time well. I apologize for that. So next meeting. All right, Neighborhood Safety Unit. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Supervisor Chavez, Supervisor Cortese, members of the committee. Thank you for having us. We will definitely keep our presentation brief, but we're excited to present to you the data today on the program. My name is Charmaine Moran. I'm with the Neighborhood Safety Unit, and I have Dr. Nicole Jha with Applied Survey Research here. We're going to jump right into the data, but first I wanted to give you, so we're going to talk about performance data. But the bulk of our presentation is really about our results from the community safety survey. So we'll dive into that, and Dr. Jha will explain those results. I'm not going to spend too much time on these performance summary tables. So in brief, we're meeting our performance targets, which we have in the past for both zip codes 95122 and 95020. Some of the events and activities that take place under these performance targets are outlined in our ledge file. So if you wanted to get more information about that, that's there. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump right into the results of our community safety survey. We've conducted this survey now for 4 years, but we are excited that we've been collecting more and more data each year. So this year we have some exciting results we want to share with you. Before we jump into it, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on this particular survey. First, the purpose of this survey is to really get a pulse from the communities that we serve, in particular East San Jose and East Gilroy, with respect to their residents' perceptions of safety. And we do that in a variety of ways. We've used, Nicole and her team have developed a robust way of categorizing different areas of neighborhood safety, and she's going to talk briefly about that. But just to give you a sense that the purpose is really to gain a pulse of perception of safety, and then the hope is that we use that data to then work with communities so it can drive their own decision-making processes and prioritization of actionable items on their community action plans. So that's really the purpose of it. Also, I wanted to note before we jump into the data that this survey is not an evaluation of the impact of the Neighborhood Safety Unit services or programs. We believe that we now have a rich set of data, a good understanding, and a trusting relationship with the communities that we serve, that we can move into that realm of developing pre and post surveys that measure the impact of the services and programs that we deliver, but this survey does not reflect an evaluation of NSU. And then, so finally, just a little brief background on the methodology. We collect data from a variety of locations. as you all know, the communities that we serve are have been underserved for many years, and so we build our relationships based on trust and based on commitment. And so the way that we collect our data, there is sensitive data in this survey, topics that folks generally don't like to respond to. So we collect this data in usual settings that are such as National Night Out, health fairs. We've collected data by going door to door and Party in the Park and such events. We've also gone into school campuses to collect this data. So it's usually in an environment that is larger, lots of people are around. And Nicole's going to talk a little bit more about the specific numbers. One other thing I wanted to know, this year we were fortunate enough to collect a large sample size of youth data at Overfelt High School. And as you look at this report, this is something that the Juvenile Justice System Collaborative members pointed out to us as we reported back to them last week, that we aggregated the data of the Overfelt responses with the data collected for the youth who reside in Valley Palms. And then we compared that data to previous years' responses on certain data points. We understand that that probably wasn't the best way to do a comparison analysis, and one recommendation that came from that committee is that we disaggregate the Overfelt data since it was fairly large, so that we're not comparing, you know, sort of one kind of apple to another kind of apple, that we're really looking at responses that we could make comparisons to. So we recognize that. We just wanted to point that out before we dive into the data with you.
So you only have a few minutes
Yeah,
now.
sorry, okay.
So I'm going to say dive away, but
Okay.
choose your slides carefully. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I will do my best to move quickly. So what does the community safety measure, safety survey measure? Well, you can see here, I'm not going to get into the details. It measures things like social cohesion, youth perceptions of the availability of caring adults, neighbors' willingness to intervene. I won't get into all of these because you have copies of the slides. Self-efficacy, how often residents talk with family, friends, and neighbors. This year, we added a new measure of family communication to really understand the family dynamics and how well parents and adult caregivers are able to discuss violence and crime in the neighborhood as a sort of buffering youth against the effects of violence. Shootings and other incidents, access to guns, and reasons for carrying guns. And so to jump right in, you can kind of see here from 2016, you can see how the amount of data that has been gathered using this tool has actually increased quite a bit across the years. In terms of demographics, the majority of adult and youth respondents identified as Latino Hispanic. The majority have lived in their neighborhoods for more than 10 years. Valley Palms adult respondents tended to be slightly older and more likely to have graduated from high school compared to those from Gilroy. And 43% of Gilroy youth lived in the NSU project area of East Gilroy, while only 13% of Overfelt High School youth lived in the NSU project area, which is what Charmaine spent a little bit of time explaining. So let's move right into key takeaways. Let's look at Valley Palms first. Again, really looking at high-level trends across the years, because we have data across 4 years, we're able to kind of look at how things have changed across the years. Because of the small sample size in 2016 and 17, that data has been combined to be able to kind of match and be compared against the higher numbers in 18 and 19. So compared to previous years, Valley Palms adults this year reported significantly higher social cohesion, informal collective action, collective efficacy, and perceived safety during the day. When I say significantly higher, it just means that the difference isn't due to chance alone. These are the little statistical gadgets that we use in order to say with greater confidence that this difference is something, in fact, that's more we're confident in. Significant negative trends. Valley Palms adults reported significantly lower self-efficacy and perceived safety at night. And among Overfelt youth or Valley Palms youth, there was only one significant positive trend across years related to fewer neighborhood problems. And most negative trends for Valley Palms youth occurred from 17 to 18 and had to do with school support, self-efficacy, collective efficacy, and perceived safety during the day. However, compared to last year, this year, Overfelt youth or Valley Palms youth reported significantly lower informal collective action. Okay, we're going to just move through just to get to the conclusions. This one we're going to pass, and that one. Okay. So one thing new to this, this year's, go back. Okay. We're going to focus on the questions about access to guns. So Valley Palms adults and Overfelt youth, they differed in terms of the responses about gun accessibility. So just to be clear, the same questions were asked on the adult survey as the youth survey. And you can see here that there was a greater proportion of youth that reported that they or someone they know carry a gun, own a gun, and know how to get a gun compared to the proportion of Valley Palms adults. Okay, we're going to go on to Gilroy. And so just a really brief overview of this. Actually, unlike in Valley Palms adults, the trends actually don't really change too much among this population, and that's really interesting in and of itself, both in terms of the positive trends and negative trends. They seem to be kind of staying stable across the years. For Gilroy youth, again, results revealed no significant positive differences from 2018 to 19. One small difference from 2016 to 17 to 18. And then this year marked a significant drop in social cohesion among Gilroy youth from 18 to 19. We're going to get straight to this access to guns. So overall, a greater percentage of Gilroy youth respondents reported they or someone they know carry a gun, own a gun, and know how to get a gun compared to Gilroy adult respondents. Again, really emphasizing the difference in perceptions from youth compared to adults living in the same community. How about this one? The reasons why people carry guns. Okay. So again, same questions were asked in Gilroy. So 10% of Gilroy adults and youth think people carry guns to assist them in getting things that they want or need. And 14 to 16% think people carry guns to intimidate others. However, 82% of Gilroy youth and 53% of Gilroy adults think people carry guns to feel safe, protected, or to defend themselves. Okay. And so one question that was asked at the end of the youth surveys was, what recommendations would you make in order to make this neighborhood a safer place for other young people like yourselves? And so this is a qualitative analysis of the 156 responses. Not all youth responded to this, and this was an open response question. Kids could write as much or as little as they want. And so here's what the results show, is that 29% of these 156 responses said nothing. Actually, everything is fine. It's okay. 15% wanted less crime and violence and greater safety. 8% wanted greater police presence. 7% more sports and recreational opportunities and a cleaner, nicer neighborhood. 5 to 6% wanted reduced drug dealing and drug use. Some just said, I don't know. They wrote something. And so this is really the unfiltered version of what you're seeing, of what youth were responding. And to wrap up, in Gilroy youth, among Gilroy youth, they were asked the same question, and 21% of the 98 responses that were provided said, again, nothing, my neighborhood is safe enough. 19% said they wanted more recreation activities and facilities. 13% more community interaction and connection. 10% less violence and greater safety. And again, clean neighborhood, home improvement, and then these other responses. I'm going to turn it back to Charmaine to just wrap up and talk about next steps.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you. We're happy to answer any questions. We do have some next steps that we'd like to share with you, but instead of going through those, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, since I have to leave, Supervisor Chavez, if I can just say on the report's thorough, great, and the indicators are encouraging. You know, obviously we've been tracking this for months and months and a couple of years and so forth. So it's good to see all of that. I don't want to comment on any of the responses, but they're interesting. All I want to say is really to my chair is that the references to accessibility, Family Resource Center accessibility, I think are something that we need to figure out how to follow up, zoom in on and follow up on, because we've had separate conversations in here about why that corridor, the Lanai, what we call it the King Road corridor, those of us who represent out there, but obviously the Lanai piece of the NSU is right there, and we've tried to articulate in here, I think both of us have, how important it is to have that accessibility out there. And I'm not sure, well, this raises a red flag, that's all. I just want to I want to raise a red flag again. So thank you. And I appreciate the report, and I apologize for having to leave before you talk about any other next steps. But as you know, we're very active in communicating with you in between these meetings, so we'll
Great.
continue that.
Thank you so much.
And then, Bob, what I would just ask is that perhaps we could have a conversation between you and Chief Garnett to talk a little bit about that access question and help us understand what the disconnect is before we meet again. That would be really helpful. I think, you know, I had a chance to look at the report. I think it's very helpful. There are just a couple of issues that I want to flag, and they're not, well, anyway, just a couple issues. One is that I'm very interested in understanding the difference between the way that both women and girls and men and boys, how they see their environments. And the other thing I'm interested in is, apropos of the earlier conversation we have, is how people are identifying and how we think about that relative to the work that we're doing in the future. And then the last is that, you know, I've been watching this with a lot of just enthusiasm. This is really something that was a vision of Dave's that I think has come to, it's going to be something that's going to really help us think very critically about quality of life and public safety. One of the requests that I would make is that I'm really interested in us better understanding how people set standards for their own communities. And I actually think one of the most interesting slides was the very last one that was an open-ended, you know, like in our community, we need more after-school activities. And again, the age, gender, I mean, all of the gender would help too, just understanding how do we respond to that. And I'll just say this as an example, particularly in Gilroy. We have two voices there, one that says we have enough resources to help children and young people, and then we have children saying that's actually, nope, not true. And that is something that the board could weigh directly in on and be, I think, really helpful in how we think about that. So I'm really, as you think about what your recommendations are, I really want to see how those are hinged to the more open-ended questions, and I really would like to see the gender breakdown relative to safety. I think that's going to help us on some other work we're doing relative to guns as well. And then lastly, I know that Chief Garnett was part of a discussion where we were having a conversation about you know, the future of the Mayor's Gang Task Force and what policy initiatives were going to be coming out of that. And it's reflective to me of Gilroy in this sense, that I think the county, as we start to have bigger conversations around what we're going to do around prevention, and that's why I was so interested in hearing from Dr. Blume today, my bad, but, you know, like really diving into that it's going to require us, I think, as a county to think very differently about the way we support cities. Right now we have a lot of resources in one city, but I think the corridor that we have to be looking at is really Gilroy, Morgan Hill, San Jose, all the way to Milpitas, and that the lack of that, your research is helping us think about that corridor more. So I'm really putting a pin in this just to say that as we start to have more conversations with the Mayor's Gang Task Force, I think there would be a very good, I think sharing this report with Angel and Mario, and then having a conversation with them about the implications of it would be interesting for us prior to us having this, this bigger meeting with them. And I don't know when that's been scheduled, but it would be a request because it's actually a great report. Any other thoughts you want to make sure I have? No? Thank you. I'm so sorry you ended up at the end. That's not from a lack of enthusiasm. And we both read it, so it wasn't. So
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move then to our verbal reports. And I don't know, Bob, if you or Ignacio have anything that we should be knowing about.
Thank you very much. I did have just a couple of quick updates. One is I had previously reported out to the committee about AB 253, which is the pilot for the court around remote court reporting. We have begun to meet with Presiding Judge Ryan, who also has the 3 supervising judges for civil, criminal, and family as part of that committee. And Department 70, which is one of our 2 courtrooms, will be part of the pilot beginning the first week in March to begin testing out remote court reporting with an evaluation component towards the end of the calendar year. So we're excited about that. And then the second item I wanted to update everyone on is that we received an update on our federal performance measures for the Department of Child Support Services for January 2020. Our overall ranking is 23 out of 52 county child support agencies in California, which happens to be our highest ranking that we've ever received. So I wanted to congratulate our staff for all their good work and commitment and continued success in improving the services that we provide to the families that we serve.
And please share my thanks and congratulations. That is a big deal.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bob?
So, not good news, but we wanted to mention that after lots of legal challenges, the public charge issue has gone into effect effective this Monday. Not something we're obviously happy about or pleased about, but it's just really important that we are able to share as much information as possible, encourage people to reach out to the resources that are available to sort out how this affects them. Every family situation is going to be different, so it's really important that families and individuals reach out for qualified legal advice. The State Department of Social Services is maintaining a website that is a resource for all immigration and public benefit attorneys who can provide this advice to folks. What we want to say is that, in general, this is still, despite I think perception, has a fairly limited scope in terms of its effect. Not all immigrants are subject to the public charge determination. Refugees, asylees, temporary protected status applicants, special immigrant, juvenile asylum applicants, certain victims of crimes, including domestic violence, trafficking, and among other issues, are not necessarily subject to this. So it's just really critical that folks do the diligence to examine their situation, reach out to the resources that are available, and determine whether or not this impacts them. Because, as we said, benefits and services are available. Nothing changes on our end in terms of eligibility for benefits. So they're still accessible. Folks just need to make that determination as to what's best for them.
Is there a way on your website, like is there an anonymous way that people can determine that yet?
No, there is not. It's been an effort that's been in play.
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, could you have a conversation with the Office of Immigrant Relations and just let us know?
Will, yeah.
Okay, because I think that people almost want a checklist so they can check without talking to us. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody for the meeting. And I just want to reiterate the point that Dave raised is that, change happens often because of conflict. And I think that's okay. All right, everyone. Thank you. We are adjourned. Next meeting, March 26, 2020.